Hey, this is Coach Taylor with the Championship Football Coaches Clinic podcast, sponsored by Reps Virtual Reality, First Down Playbook, Rack Coach, The Top Hopper, Sideline Design, Sports Workbook, and Tip of the Spear. And everybody knows that watches the show that I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. So I text Tommy the other day, and he texted me back, well, we're on the road. I'll text you when I get home. So, Tommy, when I texted you, where were you coming from and where were you going to?
We just left Foxborough, Massachusetts. We actually were able to stay right next door to the stadium while we were there. And, of course, I live on the Outer Banks. And so it was a long drive. We were about 15 hours in the car because the weather going up was really bad. And the weather coming back wasn't much better. So I'm not a good driver in the snow because I'm just not used to it. So I take my time. But there's a lot of other people out there who absolutely have no business on the road when the weather's bad.
So MK there, she's one of our loyal fans, and she is a Steelers fan. And I told the kids in my class, I said, there's only 4 Black head coaches, African-American head coaches in the NFL, and 2 of them are from Virginia. And, Richmond, 757, I told them, I said, look, they're from the same place as y'all. Nobody in LA knows the difference between Hampton and Richmond. How much of an honor is that to have Mike Tomlin and your high school player from Kickitan, Jerod Mayo, be NFL head coaches? Only 32 of those guys in the universe.
Well, I think it's very special. I mean, for me, I know what a special experience it's been, one, to have him as a player. And to be honest, he's not the first Patriot I coached. I coached a young man named Antoine Harris, who was on the first Super Bowl winning team. I coached him when I was in Raleigh. But I think it's really special not only to recognize the ability of young coaches like Jerod, but also to give them the opportunity, regardless of color. But, I think a lot of us who've been in the game a long time are of the opinion that if you just keep recycling guys, you're not giving these young guys a chance, black, white, yellow, green, or purple. But, I think it's very special for those of us who have coached in that area for so long, not, in Virginia particularly, but especially in the 757, because there's really good football players that have come out of that area. Just like up in your area, you've had a lot of, NFL guys, big-time college guys come out of that area. So to have 2 of them rise up to be, to be head coaches in the NFL, I know that one of the guys that was in high school ahead of me, he went to John Yates. Ivan Fears was the running backs coach there for, I guess, 20 years. And I remember watching him when I was in the 6th grade. So he was a stud. So there's a lot of good football players that have come out of that area. Some coaches, but it's really good to see them get rewarded for being there and doing what they needed to do to get promoted and get hired.
MK said that she will be nice today about the Patriots since we have a special guest that coached the Patriots coach. MK, we're high school coaches. We're former college coaches. You don't have to be nice. All right. We can take it from every which way. I mean, so I was watching the press conference with Robert Kraft and Jerod, and Robert Kraft says when they drafted him that he immediately went and introduced himself to Robert Kraft. And I told my class, I said, dude, the smartest guy on that stage is Jerod Mayo, because Jerod Mayo went right to the owner and built that connection, that relationship. So talk a little bit about, when was the first time you heard about Jerod and you met him, Coach?
Well, Jerod and I kept in touch the whole time he was gone. And fortunately, I've been able to keep in touch with a lot of my former players and students as well. Jerod told me, he said, Coach, I'm going to get drafted. I just don't know where. But then I didn't hear from him, right before the draft. But I did ask him, I said, "Are you going to be in New York?" He said no. And he stayed home with his family and waited for the phone call. He was actually raking leaves in the yard with his mom when he got drafted.
Man.
He's always been a humble guy. It's never been about, hey, what kind of awards am I getting? What kind of recognition am I getting? I mean, you're talking about a kid that was, all state, all this, all that, all American, and, was all academic. If they'd have had an all academic team, he was a National Honor Society kid. He also sang in our select chorus at Kickingham called the Harbor Lights.
Man.
And there were 5 football players in that group. There were like 20 kids in the group and 5 of them were football players. So, he was a well-rounded young man. I was fortunate to be able to coach his 2 younger brothers as well. They come from a great family. So, I told the folks the other day from the Boston Globe and from the Patriots, I said, the only thing I can take credit for in what he's accomplished is I figured out how to line him up in high school so he could go do his thing. Other than that, we were big in the weight room, and he and both of his brothers, as well as a lot of our other players, fell in love with not only being in the weight room with their team, but seeing the results that they were able to get because of it. But, and when he got drafted, it's the same thing when he became head coach. I don't know who was more excited, me or him.
Yes.
It's
man. I'm getting emotional just thinking about it, man.
Yeah. When you say, I've had, I think, 8 or 9 guys that have eventually gotten at least a cup of coffee in the NFL, and it's a real blessing, but it's, God-given talent and then what they do with it, because I've seen other guys that I thought were going to have that opportunity that either didn't put in the work or just didn't get that much better. You see them as freshmen and sophomores, and they're tremendous. And then they, by the time they're seniors, they're the same as they were as a sophomore. But to have a young man get drafted in the first round, to be able to play in Super Bowls, and to be honest, there's a trivia question here. His brother, Deron.
Yeah.
Jerod played in the Super Bowl the same year Deron played in the Grey Cup. The Patriots lost the Super Bowl, and Deron's team won the Grey Cup same year. I said, I don't think that's ever happened before. 2 brothers, one in Canada and one in, here in the United States, playing in the biggest game in the same year. But, again, he's a very humble young man. I thought he did a good job the other day keeping the reporters at bay. They were trying to nail him down. And I told him afterwards, I said, if coaching doesn't work out, you should be a politician.
Amen. Amen. Why do we not have more guys like Jerod Mayo or Nick Saban going into politics? Is it because they're too honest? I mean,
yeah, I taught government for 20 years.
Yeah, and I'm teaching it now. It's my first year. I love it.
Yeah, and I love teaching it, but I'm also a skeptic.
Yeah.
And I used to tell my students, you need to have a little bit of skepticism in whatever you hear coming from the government. But also, they said, well, Coach, why don't you run for office? I said, because I'm too honest. I said, I can't tell people what they want to hear. I try to tell them what they need to hear. And I think as a coach, if you're going to be a good coach, you need to tell people what they need to hear, not just what they want to hear. And you and I have both been in that situation with players and parents where they don't really want to hear what you need to tell them. They want to hear what they think they want to hear. And so, I've just always been that way. I've been accused of being old school. I've been accused of being blunt, and I plead guilty to both of those charges. So, but I think it's helped me, with my guys. It's not so much about winning games. It's about having your young players become grown men and become good dads, husbands, and community members. I was telling somebody not too long ago, right before all this was announced, I was talking to a guy at my church, and I said, as a coach, I think my won loss record is about 500. I don't really know because I haven't kept up with it. But, I've taken over a lot of programs where the coach left or has been fired or whatever. But the biggest thing is the idea that our success as high school coaches is really measured 10, 15, 20 years down the road. What did we do to help those young men grow into grown men, to become what they need to be successful and happy, whether they're successful managing a McDonald's or they're the head coach of the New England Patriots. I mean, it's success and happiness. And I think we're in a unique place to help guide them, in the right direction and down the right path.
Yeah. So it took me like 40 some years to come up with these three things. But even in this podcast, we're trying to do it. Like, number one, we're changing lives. Two, we're helping others. Three, we're building champions. And like with Jerod Mayo going to be, one of the 32 guys that are head coaches in the biggest league in the world. I mean, and you said you were more proud or maybe even happier than him, but as a coach, that's basically, that is like our reward is to see others succeed. So talk a little bit about that, Coach. And I mean, man, I don't even know how you feel. I mean, I didn't even know you were coming back from Boston.
Right. Well, and the thing of it is, I mean, for me, and I'm excited because it makes me happy when I see, when you got a guy who's 15 years old and he says, Coach, I want to be a professional football player.
Yes.
And, Jerod could have played every sport in school and been a standout. He was that good of an athlete. I mean, you're talking about a guy who was 6'2", 215 pounds, who ran a 4.57 40-yard dash.
Yes.
Coming out of high school. So, he could have run track. He could have been a basketball player. I mean, he could dunk a basketball. When he was a 8th or 9th grader, he was clocked at 80+ miles an hour pitching. So he could have done a lot of things, but he told me when I asked him about playing other sports, he said, Coach, I'm a football player. He said, I want to be a football player, and I'm going to do everything I can to make my dream come true. And, I think a lot of guys have that dream, but Jerod, he knew that he had to have his academics right. He knew he had to do, his social life right. In other words, behave in school and those kind of things. Plus, his mom, she was raising 4 boys as a single mom. And I mean, all 4 of those boys walked the straight and narrow because their mom was such a strong woman. And, I watched her. Of course, she had remarried by the time the guys got to high school. But, I know that Jerod's grandfather, who was retired military and a minister, and, his mom, they really played a big role in creating who those boys are. And now that they're men, they're all successful. I mean, Duran is a strength coach with the Patriots. Derek is a property manager up in D.C. area. And Shamont, I can't remember what Shamont does, but he was like an assistant manager with Walmart. But, all those
Walmart's worth more than all of them.
Yeah, exactly. But, and they've all done well, because of the way they were raised. But I look at it from the perspective of, and I know you've experienced the same thing. You have players who've been gone from your presence for 20 or more years, and they still call, they still text, they still send you messages on Facebook. Those kind of things are special to me. And to be honest with you, I changed my major my senior year in college. I got a chance to work with a local high school coaching, and I fell in love with coaching. I had no thoughts about becoming a coach, and I just fell in love with it. And we actually won a state championship that year. And I had one of the guys who I coached come up, and it was his first year playing football. And he came up and he said, Coach, I just want you to know how much of a difference you made this year. And right then and there, it was like a light bulb went on. So I literally went and that fall and changed at the end of that fall to spring semester, changed my major so I could become a teacher and a coach. And since then, to have a young man say, Coach, you made a difference. You helped me become a better man, whatever. And, the Facebook responses have been very kind, very supportive. And that's the kind of thing. It's not about my ego. It's about realizing that if your goal in life is to make a difference, then this is a place you can do it.
Yes.
Being a coach.
it makes me think of Joe Taylor. And
Yep.
one of the first clinics I ever went to, you were probably there, Coach. Chris Beatty, who's the receiver coach for the Chargers, was speaking.
Yep.
The guys in the crowd, he's probably 25 years old. They basically laughed him out of the auditorium because he said he didn't practice running the ball. Then Coach Bill D spoke, and Coach Joe Taylor said in that clinic, coaching is our ministry.
Yes.
And we're doing God's work.
Yeah.
MK wants to know, is coaching high school fun? That's the thing, Coach. Everybody, there's an old saying, and I've asked Chan Gailey this. Rec coaches want to go to high school. High school coaches want to go to college. College guys want to go to the NFL, and NFL guys want to go back to high school.
Yeah.
And Chan Gailey said that's because the high school coaches, that's pretty much the purest form of football. And Coach Dick Vermeil, not Dick Vermeil, the Pittsburgh Steelers defensive coordinator that blitzed so much, head coach of the Bengals, Coach Dick LeBeau.
Yep.
He said that the greatest coaches in America are in high school. So MK wants to know, is coaching high school fun? I don't care what level it is, man. You've coached college, so tell us a little bit about your experience and how much fun you've had, Coach, everywhere you've been.
I tell my guys all the time, if you're not having fun, and I told my college position group the same thing, you work all week, just like in a regular job, you work all week to get paid. So the work that you put in 4 or 5 days a week, whatever it is, you play those games to get paid, but you have to have fun while you're doing it because it is a game. And if it's not fun, you shouldn't be doing it. When you get to college, it becomes more like a job because of the hours that you put in and the things that you have to do, the stuff you have to go through. My first year in college, I played on what they call the meat squad. And, now we have better terms for it, show team, scout team, whatever you want to call it. But they just called us the meat squad because it was literally like being in the meat grinder. If somebody got hurt, it was next. But, the idea for me, and it is a job, but I tell people all the time, a job is something you do for money when you'd rather be doing something else. And in the 38 years I coached, I never went to work one day.
Amen.
It was, like you said, it was a ministry and it was a calling. It's a passion. Now, was it all fun and games? There are times when you have to do things that are not fun, but if you don't enjoy it, and I'll be honest with you, I had to retire in 2020. I've been retired for 3 years. 4 years now. And I ran the clock this year at First Flight High School for the football games. And I still get chills up and down my spine when they play the national anthem. And I always told my wife, I said, I'll know it's time to go when I stop getting chills when they play the national anthem. And, if I can't remember a time when I haven't stood on the sidelines when they play that music and gotten a little choked up. I still do. Don't get me wrong. If I could go back to coaching today, I would. But, there opportunities for a 63-year-old man are just not out there. But, the idea that
special assistant, Coach.
Yeah, there you go. I told Jerod, I said, if you need a get back, Coach, I'm your guy, and I work for swag.
Amen.
So, we were joking back and forth about that. And I said, now, if you really need a driver, somebody to carry your briefcase or your backpack, or your luggage to the bus or whatever, I can still do that. I'm still strong enough to carry the baggage. But, we had a good joke and a good laugh about it. But, I think that what we do, people say, oh, you don't make any money. Nobody gets into high school coaching for money. Not everybody's going to be Nick Saban. Not everybody's going to be Bill Belichick. Not everybody's going to make $20 million a year. For those of us that made $5,000 a year to put in 100 hours a week, you don't think about that. You usually spend more than that putting it back into your program. But if you're doing it for the right reasons, you're doing it because you have a passion for what you do, you have a love for the game, and you love your guys or your girls. I coach girls basketball and volleyball and all of my players. I'll give you an example. I coached at Windsor for 3 years.
Man.
And they had their 100th year of football this year. And the new head coach and the new AD invited me to come back to celebrate that 100 years and the only championship the school's ever won in 100 years.
Wow.
We won a region championship in 94.
That's peanut country. Peanut country. That's where peanuts come from.
I had 6 young ladies that were my student managers. 4 of them showed up, and we had 30-some of the players show up for that night. Mm-hmm. And then the ones that couldn't be there were, either lives too far away or had to work or in the military or whatever. But to have those guys come back and celebrate, I mean, it's been 30 years, since that happened. At least I think my math's right, but it's been a long time, so to have them come back and to talk about the memories, not only of that year, but their experience as football players. And what's always been fun to me is when you go get around a group of guys like that and they start mimicking the coaches and the things that you said to them and your mannerisms and stuff like that. And, some people get upset when they because you're being mocked, but it's all good fun. So, I always told them, I said, hey, you got me down good. I got nothing to hide. I got nothing to hide. One of the young men who played on that team, he passed away, but he had the best imitation of myself and my defensive coordinator having a conversation. And he had our voices down, our mannerisms down, and everything. And, when I was talking to Jerod and his brothers the other day, same thing came up. Well, Coach, you remember such and such. You remember saying this. Sometimes I don't remember it because a lot of times I'm a very emotional guy. And sometimes, as my daddy used to say, my alligator mouth went into gear before my hummingbird brain engaged. So some things that came out of my mouth were probably not repeatable.
That's me.
Yeah. But it's, I think what happens is everything you do, if you're doing it for the right reasons, comes from your heart, and if you're passionate about it, there are times when your emotion is going to override your common sense, and you have to kind of rein that in a little bit. But I think all of us at one time or another, I tell folks, I say, if you haven't cried, if you haven't laughed, if you haven't had your heart broken, then you didn't put enough into being a coach.
Amen.
It's a relationship. It's like a marriage or a family or whatever. You have to put into it, but you're not always going to get the results that you want. But that doesn't stop you from putting your heart and your soul and your effort and energy, time, and all that kind of stuff into it to make it be the best it can be for everybody involved. And I have a lot of great memories. I have a lot of young men that, like I said, that still stay in touch, that have done some tremendous things. They have great families. They've been in the military. They've done things in the business world. I mean, some of them are coaches. I mean, Bruce Carroll, who you know.
Yeah, I know Bruce well.
Bruce played for me. He got his first assistant coaching job working for me. He took over at Windsor 2 coaches after I left.
Man.
But he was on my staff as the running back coach there. And so, to see people like that succeed, it's just very gratifying. And I like I said, I spoke to a men's group right after I had my transplant, and I was talking to them about not only about how I feel like I'm here because of God's grace and mercy, but I was put here to do something. Mm-hmm. I was put here to make a difference. Amen. And I want to say, when I'm gone, what I'd like for people to say about me is that while he was here, he got the most out of the years he had, and he made a difference to a lot of people. And that's not about ego. It's just about having a life's mission. And, I feel like I'm still here because that mission's not finished, whatever it may be. If it's telling people to be an organ donor or to talk to people about football or to mentor young men, whatever. If it's something I can do that makes a difference as my life goes on, then I want to try to do it.
When Coach, I know you were sick and the transplant. Is there anything that's on your heart that you can talk about that, to our listeners?
Sure. I at the time I was still coaching. Never felt sick. That spring 2020, I went to my doctor. My doctor was still seeing patients during COVID, and I always got a physical at the end of football season. Well, that for some reason I didn't get it in November like I usually got it. I ended up canceling my appointment for something, and then of course COVID came along, so everything got slowed down a little bit. Well, I finally got in to see him in April. Well, they did the blood work and everything, and he calls me up. He goes, "I'm sending you to a specialist. There's something weird about your blood work." Okay. So I go to see the GI doctor, and he says, "We're going to do some tests, do some blood work." So they did all that, and I go in to get the results. He said, "I'm pretty sure it's not cancer, but I want to do one more test." So I went back, got more blood work, and they did a CAT scan and an MRI where they inject the dye in you. So I did that on a Friday. It was on a Thursday, and he called me on Father's Day and said, "Mr. Austin, you have liver cancer and you need a transplant." I was working 2 jobs. I was working my regular job in Virginia Beach, driving back and forth from Nags Head every day. I was working part-time down here at the beach. Never slowed down. Turned 60 years old that year. Never crossed my mind that, I was sick.
Wow.
So from that point, they sent me to another specialist, and we went to that doctor expecting to hear about the transplant. And he said, "Oh, no, you're not a candidate for a transplant. You're too old. We've got to treat your cancer." Okay. Wow. So we end up going to Cancer Treatment Center in near Atlanta, Georgia. We get down there, and they do all this blood work, and they do all this stuff. And they're like, "Oh, well, we've got to set up a treatment plan because we're not sure what kind of cancer you have." Okay. 3 visits down there, still had no answers. Well, my first doctor called me, and he said, "You need a transplant. Your cancer is not really treatable. So I've got an appointment set up for you at VCU." My wife had also set up appointments for me at the Mayo Clinic, at Sloan Kettering in New York, and MD Anderson in Houston. We were going to go somewhere until we got the answer, either the final answer or we got an answer we wanted to hear. We got to VCU and told them our story. And I had gone from working 2 jobs in June to being in a wheelchair in 6 weeks. And
I remember, Coach, I saw you at Busch Gardens.
Yeah, I turned orange, and I was pretty sick. And so we got to VCU on a Tuesday. I checked out of the hospital in Atlanta on Monday. We flew home in the middle of a hurricane, went to Richmond on Tuesday. They took blood. I came back to Nags Head. They called me on Wednesday and said, "You need to come back to the hospital." So I went back to the hospital, and I stayed in the hospital until Election Day. 1 month after I was admitted to the hospital, I got my transplant. But I moved on the transplant list on Friday, had a chance to get my first liver on Monday. The liver wasn't viable. I went on Wednesday and got my liver. So I was only on the list 5 days. So wow. I was pretty sick. They told my wife I had about 2 weeks left. But my faith kept me going. I told somebody at one time, I said, "I don't know how people deal with that kind of illness if you don't have some type of faith." I told my wife when we went out of the operator, we went to pre-op, told her when we left pre-op, I said, "I guarantee you, I'm going to get a liver in the next 48 hours. I said, "I just feel it in my heart because I don't believe God's finished with me yet. Whatever he has in his plan, I'm looking forward to, because I learned a long time ago, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans."
Yes, I heard that.
Yeah, and well, it's a country song, but I mean, it's true, because
who sings it?
I think Brad Paisley, but I'm not sure. But I've heard it before, and it's true, because I know that without God's grace and mercy, I would not be here. I told a minister friend of mine, I said, "So if I'm still here, then the plan for me is not done yet.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I was very, very blessed to have the opportunity to get a liver. Not everybody gets one. You know, it's about being compatible. And mine came from a living donor. I mean, it was someone who was brain dead. And we didn't know exactly when I was going to the operating room because they had to make arrangements for all the organs that were going to be donated to go to their destination and then harvest all the organs at one time. And so, you know, when they came in at 9 o'clock on Tuesday night and said, "You're going tomorrow, we just don't know what time." So I went in. They came and got me at 5:30. I went in the operating room at like 6:30 and came out at 2:30 the next morning.
Man.
And my surgeon said as soon as we hooked the new liver up, it started working. But it was a close call because they couldn't tell if I had bile duct cancer or just liver cancer. Bile duct cancer, there's nothing they can do for you. I mean, Patrick Swayze, people like that, they all died from bile duct cancer. And if you have it, the best thing you can do is get your affairs in order because you don't have long, because it moves pretty fast. But my tumor grew from probably the size of the end of your finger to probably close to the size of a ping pong ball in 2 months. They said my liver wasn't even half the size it should have been for a normal grown man when they took it out.
Wow, Coach.
Yep.
Well,
you know, and people have been very good and very gracious. You know, we had a lot of support, a lot of prayers. And, you know, Jerod reached out, texted me about, I'd say probably 100 of my former players contacted myself, my wife, or my daughters, saying, "Hey, is there anything we can do for Coach?" The group at Catholic High School and the group at Greenbrier, where I'd coached before, you know, they did a fundraiser because my wife was staying up there. You know, we were up there for almost 3.5 months. So, you know, they did all kinds of things. The team got T-shirts made, or the AD got T-shirts made for the team, and they said Catholic football on the front and Team Austin on the back. They sent me one of and you know, just to have that that support, you know, the idea that people who
love.
People do love you in spite of what you have to do to get them where you want them to be. They still love you. I had a guy tell me, I interviewed for a job one time, and there were 2 players on the interview panel. And I made the comment that every young man who plays a sport wants to have discipline and wants to be held accountable and responsible. So, and they nodded their head because, you know, I've been in programs where there was very little of any of those 3 things. And when I've been called old school, it's because I still believe those 3 things are important.
And those 3 things are love. You can't love somebody and not have discipline.
Right. And hold them accountable. Make them be responsible for the choices they make and the things they do. And you and I have both seen teams that, you know, rack up 15, 16 penalties in a game because they don't have any discipline. You know, we've seen it. And I've seen it.
Gene Steratore said I'm the most penalized coach of all time on any level, Coach. Yeah. I got ejected this year and suspended 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
It's unbelievable.
It's hard. It's hard not to get it because, and don't get me wrong, I learned as a young coach. Fortunately, my first principal told me, he was also my assistant coach, believe it or not. I was coaching in private school, and there were 3 of us. And the 3 of us coached the JV and the varsity. I was the head coach on Friday night and an assistant coach on Wednesday night when we played JV. We didn't have a lot of bodies. And being a first-year head coach with only a few years of experience as an assistant coach, my emotions just went up and down because we weren't winning. And you know how that is. You're sitting there, what can I do to fix this? Why can I not fix this? What am I doing wrong? So I yelled at the players and I yelled at the officials, and, you know, I stomped and threw my hat. My wife finally told me, she said, "You need to stop wearing a hat because it's embarrassing to watch you throw it around and stomp on it." So for a few years there, I didn't wear a hat. But he called me in the office, I guess the second year, And we used to meet every Monday morning after the games. And he told me, he said, you know something? He said, one of the things you need to figure out is the fact that you can catch a whole lot more flies with honey than you can with cow pies. Yeah. Said, so if you said, remember, referees are human. So they're going to make mistakes. So therefore, if you are constantly on their backs, and I coach baseball too, and I got tossed out of a few baseball games simply because, it's just hard.
It's part of the game.
Yeah. And so the idea that if I'm out of control, my players are out of control. If I'm calm and collected, then the players are going to be calm and collected. So it took me a while to learn that, but probably my last 8 or 10 years, I was more calm and collected. Not always, but I learned to talk to umpires and referees sort of under my breath. Mm-hmm. When you walk by them on the sideline or you're walking from the dugout to the third base coaching box and you say to the umpire, hey, Blue, how about calling it both ways? Kind of under your breath. You're not showing them up. But I used to do the same thing to referees. I'd say, hey, how about watching number 77? He's grabbing my guy every play. And, you get a whole lot more out of that than you do by making derogatory comments.
By cussing them out.
Yeah, exactly. But also, I know that you and I both know that the quality of the officials is different. I had a guy call me this fall. He runs the rec league program down here. And I told him after, I said, anything I can do to help you, let me know. Well, he called me one Thursday, said, Coach, I'm short an official on Saturday. Can you come do 4 games on Saturday? I've never refereed a game in my life. But I went, and in the 7, 8, 9-year-old game, I'm on the visitor's side. I'm doing the chains. And this one kid, he lined up off sides, and I told him to back up. I said, back up, son, you're offside. Well, he was moving backwards when the ball snapped. Now, the team that starts yelling at me, they're winning 35-0. And they're yelling at me about why didn't I throw the flag? And I turned around, and this one lady was giving me up the country. And I turned around, and I said, they are 8 years old, so they're still learning. So every time they thought I should throw a flag for the rest of the day, they'd holler, they're still learning. And I'm thinking in my head, what a bunch of idiots. And I'm thinking, no wonder they can't get referees and umpires, because it's not just the coaches, it's those idiots in the stands who have no clue. And 8-year-olds and their team's winning 35-0, and they're going to want me to call an illegal procedure to slow the game down. Not a chance.
And that makes me think of Jerod. I mean, he has accomplished everything that those parents would only hope and dream for their kids. Go to be a high school star, Division I, Tennessee, Patriots, NFL head coach, the most rare of them all. Yeah. And he did it the right way. Yeah. And you talked about old school discipline. I mean, Bill Belichick, his NFL coach, the guy he learned from after he learned from you and his college coaches. The thing I always hear about him is he is the best listener of all time.
Oh, he was a coach on the field in high school. He watched film. He knew everybody's job. And, he played for some pretty fiery coaches. I mean, he played for me, our defense coordinator, Dan Thompson. His position coach on offense and defense was a gentleman by the name of Corey Thomas. Corey just recently retired, but he was a retired Marine when he started coaching with us. And, he didn't play. This is the way. So all of us that were on that staff were sort of old school people. We grew up that way. We played in the 70s and 80s, so that's the way we were coached. And, of course, Coach Fulmer is very fiery. Coach Chavis was very fiery. So, and then, of course, then he goes from Tennessee playing for Coach Chavis and Coach Fulmer to Bill Belichick. And Bill doesn't say a whole lot, but when he does say something, it's usually listened to pretty strongly. But Jerod never let any of that stuff bother him. the game was never too big for him. I can remember him being a calming influence on even the coaches. Coach, we got this.
Wow.
He would not get – he was a guy who would get fired up before the game. He wasn't always a rah-rah guy, but he would, keep the guys going. But if things were getting out of hand, I had guys like him and Alan Backus and some of those guys, Wilson Banks, Vance Biella, all those guys that were on those teams were guys that would get in the huddle and say, hey, guys, just relax. Relax. It's going to be all right. We got this. We're prepared for this. Because one of the things that I would like to think they learned from us is not only watching film, but how to watch film. We had this thing on our defense everywhere I've ever been, where I've been in charge anyway. We had what we called if-thens. We would play we weren't going to change our defense every week. The Patriots, they changed their defense just about every week. As they game plan and they package what they're going to do based on what the other guys do. For me, high school's not that complicated.
No.
It can be, but people want to try to make it be. But I used to always tell my guys, look, this is our defense. This is what we do. Our goal is if we can line up right, if we can do our jobs and we hustle to the football, we've got a good chance. When I was in college, the only three things I graded my guys on was alignment, assignment, and effort. Some people, he had his wrong hand down. Who cares? Did he get where he was supposed to get to and do what he was supposed to do? So even in college, we had if-thens. If they do this, then we're going to do this. Yeah, it makes us predictable. But if you put two receivers out, we're going to put two guys out there somewhere. Now, how they line up, we might change how deep they play every week, depending on who they're lining up against. But, you put two out, I'm going to put two out. You put three out, I'm going to put three out. Yes, we're predictable, but it also builds confidence in your players. And, I think Jerod took that when he came back from Tennessee. The first time I saw him, he said, Coach, he said, I want to tell you, he said, we practice at Tennessee just like we practiced at Kickstand.
Wow.
He said, we have individuals, we have group, we have team, we have 7-on-7. He said, we practice exactly the same way. He said, I just want you to know that you prepared us to go on to the next level because when we walked in there, we weren't overwhelmed by the detail and by the organization because, in our locker room, your locker had to look a certain way. Your helmet had to be on here. Your shoulder pads had to be here. This is where you practice. He said it was that way at Tennessee. When you walked in, this is what was expected. And so, and can I take credit for that? No, because I learned it from somebody else. You and I both know that football coaches are the biggest thieves on the planet. If it's a good idea, we'll steal it. I'm not going to take credit for it, but I'll steal it. And, if it works. And so therefore, I think one of the things that we were there 2 years ago for a game and we went out to dinner afterwards and I got to meet some of the people he worked with in the business world. And he took my family and his family. We all went out to dinner and we sat around the table and talked and told stories and talked about memories. And he got a phone call and it was the film guy. And he said, just download it on my iPad. I'm coming back to the office when I leave here. Well, we left. The gathering ended about midnight. His family went home. We went to the hotel and he went back to the office.
He went back to Gillette Stadium.
Yeah, he went back to watch film because we went to a restaurant right there in Patriot Place. So he literally walked out of the restaurant, walked back to his office. So, that the work ethic has always been there. But I think that, I would like to think that what we did in high school sort of, I know what we did in the weight room. I think what we did in the film room at least planted a seed, for this is how, if I'm going to be a coach, this is how I need to do it. But, you mentioned earlier about being a high school coach. I left college coaching because I enjoyed college coaching, but I really didn't think I was having the impact that I got into coaching for. You're getting guys who are 18 to 22 years old. And don't get me wrong, I love coaching those guys. And I stay in touch with a lot of them too. And they'll say, hey, matter of fact, one of my guys is coaching at Kings Fork now, and I went to watch them play a couple of times, and he let me hang out on the sideline, and it was great to watch one of my guys coach his guys. Full circle.
Yes, sir.
So it's the idea that in college, you're getting grown men. You can have some impact on them. But in high school, you're getting them at 13 or 14 and carrying them until they're 18. And I think you can make a bigger difference and much more of an impact in those formative years versus those 18 to 22, 23 years. So, I went back to that because I missed it. I missed that. And, once you're a head coach, it's really hard to go back to being an assistant coach.
Yeah, I'm an assistant right now. I'm working with Billy Mills.
Yep, you're working with a great coach.
Oh, man.
Now, don't get me wrong. He's getting a great coach in you, too. But, Billy's been around a long time, and Billy's been successful. And I believe Billy believes in the same things. Just a few conversations I've had with him, he believes in the same type of things. He's an old school guy. Weight room, doing what you're supposed to do. Now, he goes probably 100 miles above and beyond what a lot of people do, because one of the things I learned a long time ago, coaching a football team is different from running a program. There's a lot of guys out there who are coaching a team, but they're not running a program.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I've always said I'm running a program. I'm not just coaching a team, because I'm gonna coach this team and every team afterwards as long as I'm here. So if you're building a program, it's about doing all those things. You're feeding them, and you're giving them peanut butter sandwiches and protein drinks after weightlifting. You're feeding them milkshakes to try to help them gain weight. Whatever you have to do, you're calling teachers and you're calling parents, and you're checking grades. Whatever you have to do to help them get where they want to go, to achieve that level of success and to be happy at it. I think that's what you have to do within the rules and within common sense. I mean, you and I both know guys that cross over the line and they do things that they do what they think needs to be done, whether it's against the rules or not. And I've known some of them, and I told myself, matter of fact, that when I was at Kickotan, I told our AD, because we were talking about it. We were talking about some of the other coaches that we had to coach against, or we knew.
We both coached in Virginia. Coach has been in North Carolina and Virginia sports edits, but yep. he sports edits. He coached the New England Patriots' new head coach, Jerod Mayo, when he was in high school, and Coach Austin just got back from Boston, Massachusetts. He was there when they introduced Jerod Mayo, his former player, to be the head coach. Yeah.
Yeah. But we were talking about it. I said, something, I'd rather lose every game. Than to win a trophy that's going to have some tarnish on it.
What's that saying from the Bible, Coach? A man can gain the world
and lose his soul.
Lose his soul.
Yep.
What does it say, Coach? What does it say?
That's what it says.
What does it profit a man? What does it profit a man?
To gain the world,
but lose his soul.
Lose his soul. It's not, and you've coached against people are not doing it the way you would. And I have too. But like I said, I would rather not win if I've got to bend the rules or break the rules to do it. And when I went to Kickotan, I told them, I said, guys, I've been to the mountain. I've been an assistant coach on a state championship team. I was an assistant coach on a team that played 3 times in the state championship. 2 times and lost in the semifinals another year. And, having been there and done that kind of thing, I knew what it was going to take, but I said, but we will do it the right way. We're not going to cheat because, there were people, you and I both know, even back then, there were people that during off-season workouts, there were balls on the field when there wasn't supposed to be any. I said, we will not have any footballs. We'll have step over dummies and hand shields and cones and all that kind of stuff. But there will be the footballs will stay locked up in the equipment room. We just won't do it. Now, if the quarterbacks and receivers want to take a ball and go out on the field after we're done, when we're not out there, that's fine, because there's nothing illegal about that. But we're not going to go out there and coach that. And so, I believe that all the games we've won, we've done it the right way. And when we lost games, we did it the right way. We didn't cut corners. We didn't cheat our kids. We didn't cheat the other team. And like I said, we have a lot of guys that I've had in the past have been National Honor Society guys. They've been multi-sport athletes. I'm a very big opponent of this specializing in one sport business. Fall baseball and all year long lacrosse and all year basketball. And because what you're doing is you're putting all your eggs in that basket, and you think that by playing that sport year round is going to guarantee you a college scholarship. That ain't happening. 1 in 1,000 guys that do that are going to get that scholarship. But what you've missed out on is making memories with teammates, having those experiences. And all of us know that different sports teach you different skills. You use muscles in basketball that you don't use in football, and you use muscles in football you don't use in baseball. So I think, I've been very lucky. I've had, when I went to Greenbrier, it was a baseball school. Well, the second year I was there, I had some baseball players come out because I was willing to allow them to leave practice 15 minutes early on Monday to go play in a fall baseball game. Just come play. And I picked up, and then the next year there were even more baseball players come out. Same deal. You cooperate between the coaches. And, fortunately, Pat Nichols, he was like, hey, coach, I encourage him to come play football. He said, I played football. And, he played baseball at Old Dominion and was a AAA player in the Nationals organization. So he was a football player, but he also played baseball. Baseball was his best sport, obviously. But, I think you look at that opportunity, and what got it for me was those guys went back and said, we're having fun playing the game.
And Coach, I heard D'Amico Ryans talk yesterday before the game.
Yep.
And sports edits, we live stream during the games now for the YouTube channel. And these are kids that follow us from all around the country. Sports edits. I'm the low man on the totem pole. All right. I have a laptop and it has a webcam for $40. And then I got a $20 mic here. And I'm in a junk room. Dude, there's nothing fancy about this setup. Dude, you could do this just as easy as me. But D'Amico Ryans said that they were having fun. I'll take a picture and I'll post it, okay? Sports edits. But I only got a few more minutes with Coach, and I want him to talk about this. D'Amico Ryans said that the Texans were having fun. Now, they lost, but, they changed the whole franchise in one season with C.J. Stroud. These young coaches that played in the league, like D'Amico was a linebacker, Mayo was a linebacker. What will be different, you think, or the same about a Jerod Mayo Patriots team compared to a Bill Belichick?
Well, to be honest with you, and I heard him talk about this in the press conference. One of the things I think you'll see different is that I think D'Amico and Jerod are sort of similar in the fact that even though you're making millions of dollars a year to play a game, if you're not having fun and enjoying what you're doing, then you're going to dread going to do it. You're not going to give your best because your heart's not in it. So therefore, I think what you'll see from Jerod is he is a player's coach. At least I think he will be.
When you say that, what does that mean?
Well, I think it means that you identify with them because you've been there.
Yes.
And I think also it means that the players know
you love them.
And yes, and I think the hardest thing about being in the NFL, being the head coach and the GM, is you have to make decisions that are going to affect a person's livelihood. You know, one of the things that Jerod said is, and I've preached this for 40 years, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. He paraphrased that to some extent about, if the guys know you love them, then when you have to make a decision that has a negative impact on them, they'll know you're making it because it's the best thing for the team, even though it might not be the best thing for you. And, you know, Bill's he's from a different generation. He's from my generation. I mean, he's older than I am, but, you know, we're from the 70s and 80s where, you know, coaches would kick you in the pants and call you a dog. And, you know, you just showed up every day because that's what was expected. But it's changed a lot. One of the things that I learned, was not only about that they don't care how much you know until you know how much you care, is that the past 2 generations that I've coached, if you tell them to run through the wall, they're going to ask you why. Mm-hmm. Whereas in the 70s and 80s, if you said run through that wall, they buckled their chin strap and ran through the wall. Now, is one better than the other? I don't think so. But I think young men want to know, why are we doing this drill? You know, I've never done Bull in the Ring or Oklahoma drill in my life, and as a coach, because I've never seen those things on the field. What I learned from the first head coach who gave me my first assistant job is, don't do anything in a drill that doesn't apply to being in the game.
Yes. What's your drill? It's the game. The game is the drill.
So do things that are going to make, you know, I've told my players for the last 35 years I coached, we're never going to do anything in the weight room or in practice or in the meeting room or in the film room that isn't designed to do one of 2 things: make you a better athlete or make you a better football player. You know, the weight room is about making you a better athlete as well as a better football player. When we're doing drills in the spring, agility and speed work and all that kind of stuff, those things will not only make you a better football player, they make you a better athlete, which in turn will make you a better football player. If you also play baseball and you're stronger, isn't that going to make you a better baseball player? If you're faster, isn't that going to make you a better baseball player or basketball player? If you're a wrestler and you're stronger, if you're quicker, doesn't that help you as a wrestler? So, you know, we tried to gear everything we did in our practice. I was having a conversation about 2 weeks ago with Mickey Sullivan, he was Eddie George's high school coach.
Yes.
And Mickey lives down here now. Mickey was at Fork Union for 40 some years. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, we were talking about, you know, us being old school guys, because Mickey volunteers over at the high school just like I do. And we've known each other for 30 years, I guess. And so maybe longer than that. But, you know, we were just talking about some of the things that we did and were done to us as players, and that we did early in our careers that you couldn't do now. Mm-hmm. You could get put in jail for some of it, but it was the way of the world then. So I think you have to adapt. He and I were having that conversation. Matter of fact, today by text, if you don't adapt, you know,
you become a dinosaur. You become extinct. I mean, look at Nick Saban.
I told somebody a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about offense and defense. I was talking to the acting principal at the high school. My daughter is the athletic trainer down here at First Flight, and she's been following me around since she was 8 years old. You know, she learned to tape angles when she was 10.
Wow.
So she's been in it for almost her whole life. So she was with me at the press conference the other day, and, you know, we obviously had tears in our eyes, but we were talking about some things that, you know, that have changed. When I was at Kicktan, we were a pro-eye team. You know, my favorite pass was pitching the ball to the tailback on the toss sweep.
Yeah.
And I used to tell my guys, this is the first play we're going to put in every year, and we're going to run it until somebody's band plays, either ours or theirs.
O.J. Simpson.
Yep. I mean, and So we had, we had like 5 plays, running plays, and we might have had that many pass plays, and most of them were play action. But when I left there and I went to Lakeland, we didn't have the same kind of kids. We didn't have a fullback type kid. We didn't have a tight end. We were very young up front. I didn't have a true tailback, but I had 3 6'2" or better wide receivers and another one that was 6'1". I had a 6'4" quarterback who could throw it a mile. My last year at Kecoughtan, we attempted 52 passes. My first year at Lakeland in the first scrimmage, we attempted 52 passes.
Wow.
So I think you adapt to what your kids can do. It has to be what your guys can do. Some people, they say we're a wing T team. Okay, that's great. But how do you adapt if you don't have wing T kids?
Yeah, you don't have 3 running backs.
There were several years we were a wishbone team because being a wishbone
I remember you being
team,
the single wing.
Yeah, we ran the single wing for 2 years at Kecoughtan. My last year is when we threw the ball 52 times out of the single wing. Single wing doesn't have a lot of pass plays. But I tell you what,
when you run them, they work.
We won 14 games with a team in 2 years with teams that probably should have won 4 games.
Wow.
Coach,
you're the best. And man, dude, I was just thinking, imagine if we could get you on here for 30 minutes to an hour, or imagine if, I know Coach Riemann didn't coach, but I know they're so tight. But man, wouldn't the VHSL Virginia coaches love to have Joe and Mike Tomlin on a podcast?
Yeah.
I mean, how much would that mean to the coaches in Virginia? Dude,
even if you could just get them together for 30 minutes. Yep. I mean,
yeah.
I told you, I will mention it to him, but when I left the other day, he said, Coach, if you don't hear from me for a while, he said, don't. And I said, Jerod, you go do what you need to do.
Yes.
You know my phone number. If you need something, call me. Wow. You can text me. If you need to vent to somebody who's not going to share what you say.
Yeah, because you can't talk to nobody where he is.
No. And so, he said, Coach, I appreciate that because you never know.
Mayo, Coach, to Tennessee.
Larry Slade.
Slade.
Yep. Good guy. Matter of fact, Coach Fulmer came.
Phil Fulmer was the head coach.
Yeah, he flew in, and I picked him up at the airport, and there in Newport News, and took him back to my office because he was going to do the home visit, and he invited me on the home visit, and I said, Coach, that's not fair. I said I didn't go on any of the other home visits. I said, so I'm not going to go because I've told all my guys whenever they got recruited.
Yes,
I will be glad to share my thoughts with you, but I'm never going to tell you where to go or where I think you should go. Primarily because if you're not happy there, who are you going to blame? Well, exactly. Coach Austin told me that's where I should go. So, I mean, Jerod was getting heavily recruited by NC State, which is where I went to school. Manny Diaz was there as many times as you could legally visit. And he went to his visit. He was very impressed. And but Chuck Amato was the head coach.
Yeah, I remember.
And I'll never forget this. Jerod came in after the home visit. He said, Coach, did Coach Amato come by and see you? Because Coach Fulmer came by and sat in my office for an hour and talked football. He and Coach Slade. I mean, just shooting a breeze, just talking, just like guys. Not a guy who flew in on a plane with the Super T on the tail fin, but just guys, just football guys. And I said, no. I said, I haven't heard from Coach Amato. I said, Coach Diaz, calls all the time. He said, I can't believe you're an alumnus. You played ball there. And he didn't even bother to come by and see you. I said, no. He said, I don't think that's right. I said, Jerod, it's not about me. It's about you.
Yeah.
Well, he got mad. He called Coach Diaz and said, I'm thinking about not coming to NC State if y'all going to be that rude to my coach. I said, Jerod, don't do that because it doesn't have anything to do with me. Mm-hmm. But, he was hilarious because he visited Purdue and because Phil Elmation was coaching up there then. And Phil wanted his coach.
I got to get him on the podcast.
Yeah, I said, I'll get him to come. So he had, that was one of his visits. And he came back. He said, Coach, he said, do you know how cold it is in Lafayette, Indiana? I said, no, because I've never been. He said, it's really cold. He said, I don't think I'm going to Purdue, Coach. But, yeah, he had chances to go to visit Ohio State and Miami. And it was like, Coach, I want to go somewhere where my folks can see me play.
Yeah.
And he said, I want to go somewhere where it's not that hot or that cold. You know, it was
There
a
you go.
joke, but
Rocky Top.
I think what he was really looking at was what is the best fit for me academically and environmentally. Because I told him, I said, look, I said, all that stuff they do, the lobsters and the filet mignon and the pretty girls that greet you at the airport and chaperone you around, that's going to disappear the day you show up in the summer. Because now those same guys that have been kissing your backside, slapping you on the back, are going to be cussing you like a dog when you make a mistake.
Thank you.
Don't fall in love.
I don't think there's a lot of coaches teaching that.
Yeah, like, don't fall in love with all the bells and whistles.
Yes.
Make sure you can go to a place where if that coach leaves, you're still going to be happy.
Amen.
And the environment there is one, they have what you want to study. They have the things you want that are going to help you become better. So because all that tinsel and garland, you and I both know
not all the
first day of practice, all that crap is gone.
Amen. You're right.
Because I've done it. You know, you love all those guys when you're recruiting them. Then the first day they show up late for weightlifting, you're climbing on them like Roy Rogers on a horse.
Yeah.
So, you know, you can't become enamored with the trappings. You got to look at the meat. You got to look at the meat and potatoes.
Coach, you're the best.
Well, thank you.
A round of applause. Thank you for coming on.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I appreciate you. You don't know how much I appreciate all you do.
Yeah, I love you, man. I'm gonna send you the link to this so you can send it to Jerod. And thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you, bro.
I'll press end, and then we'll stay on here for a second.